Does the First Amendment protect hate speech and speech that causes emotional distress? We will dive deeper into this subject soon. Having studied the assigned materials, I've gained a better understanding of free speech and the First Amendment and how they both tie into one another. There are a few fundamental aspects of free speech that people should know. The First Amendment protects some forms of expression but not others, protects against government interference, and the right to peacefully protest. Now, let's get into it. On page number 173, it says, "It is important to understand why hate speech laws are inherently likely to be enforced in ways that further entrench dominant political and societal groups, and that further disempower marginalized individuals and groups. This pattern is not a result of occasional abuses of the laws, but rather is the inevitable, systematic result of any use of such laws, given their irreducible vagueness, which means that they bestow largely unfettered discretion upon the officials who enforce them." This passage is important because it breaks down several main points: the disempowerment of excluded groups, the establishment of dominant groups, and the ability to make decisions without being restricted or without any problems with the government. I believe that despite the intention of hate speech laws to protect sensitive groups, they frequently end up making the power of political and societal groups much stronger. The First Amendment protects hate speech because the U.S. courts have made it a responsibility, or a liability, shall we say, to protect the free expression, even when this kind of communication is harmful or just simply offensive. Also, to answer the second part of the first question, it states on page number 199, and quote, "Since the late 19th century, American courts have recognized that certain conduct, including expressive conduct, could constitute the tort of intentional infliction of emotional distress, for which victims could seek damages in civil lawsuits." The key reason why this is important is because of the protection from severe emotional harm, which a lot of this can cause, and the responsibility for any harmful behavior that anyone possesses, for example. When it comes to protecting one from emotional harm, it is really crucial because we have to think about this a little more often. This is because real emotional suffering can occur as a result of disgraceful behavior from another individual. So if another individual caused this, then the situation would get a lot worse. There are many reasons why the First Amendment protects speech that causes emotional distress, like I said. On page number 200 in the book, it talks about the father of Marine Lance Corporal Matthew Snyder and how he was killed during his time serving in Iraq. This connects to emotional distress because it says that the award that Matt Snyder's father had received had been based on signs that picketers carried near Matt Snyder's funeral. So they were all holding up signs and that conveyed very hateful messages, hurtful and very, very strong, hateful, terrible messages, and very insulting messages about the U.S. military, which is very unfortunate, and the Catholic Church, along with that, and the LGBTQ people. This is a good example of how the First Amendment plays a huge part in emotional distress. So emotional distress can be in situations like hate speech. Hate speech is a good example of something that can cause emotional distress to a human being. To answer the second question, the First Amendment likely would not fully protect someone who refuses to use a person's preferred pronouns. I believe personally that this would be regarded as speech that is forced, which means that the government forces somebody to say something that goes against what they believe in or the beliefs that they have. The government might use compelled speech to try and get someone to say something that they shouldn't say or something that they just don't want to say. If someone prefers to be called either they or, for example, if someone prefers to be called either them or they, for example, the government should be able to enable them to boldly express themselves as the preferred pronouns that they want to be referred to as or to be identified. I think the First Amendment would not fully protect someone who refuses to use a person's preferred pronouns, because using someone's correct pronouns is frequently regarded as just basic respect to that person. So if you're calling them by the preferred pronouns, that's considered to be respectful and proper. In the book, the author touches on whether refusing to use someone's preferred pronouns is considered harassment or if it's considered free speech. For example, when we think of the word harassment in this case, one of the things that comes to mind is gender-based harassment specifically. This type of harassment is very common and unfortunate, and is a very unfortunate situation in our world due to the way some people identify themselves based on gender. Some major problems associated with using preferred pronouns include an invasion of their privacy. That's a really big issue right now, and it has been for a while. And someone might leak or share gender status information that they don't want leaked out to the public, and forcing either workers or employees at jobs, for another example, to lie about their genders. Someone who refuses to call anyone by their preferred pronouns may think that it is completely out of the norm. And lastly, it is important for us to think about this issue further and the effects they can have on people who are struggling with gender identity and harassment in our society. So to wrap up, does the First Amendment protect hate speech and speech that causes emotional distress? All of the points I mentioned above are what answers these questions. Having studied the assigned materials, I've gained a better understanding of free speech and the First Amendment and how they both tie into one another.